everyone. Good evening, good day. Hello to you too, Marcos.
Hello, Mutlu. Hello, everyone. Great to be with you.
I hope you're all well. And since our last lesson, we're going to carry on. And today is actually a very, very important lesson, because today we're going to take a look at the tools that allow us to get to the pinnacle of spiritual development. Okay, hopefully we'll be able to use those. And as usual, we've got our handy book here we'll be referring to. If you don't have one, try and get one. I know I sound like a broken record or a scratched CD, but it really helps to have these books lying around handy. So, in your previous lesson, and we did mention that actually before the previous lesson as well, we kind of had the notion that we don't really have much of a free choice. In fact, we don't have free choice at all. Okay, so we learned that if we're a desire to receive, and our nature is governed by two very, very sharp attitudes to life, which is to get what I want, which is pleasure, and to run away from pain. They don't really have much of a choice. And although some people define choosing from a restaurant menu what I'd like to eat as free choice, cats and dogs also sniff a few things, and they also eat what they smell to be good. So since we've determined that we don't want to be cats and dogs, that's not really a relevant free choice for us, is it? It isn't. So how we're going to build this free choice, we're going to take a look at today. In addition, please feel free to jot down your questions as always through the chat line. If they're relevant to the topic, that'd be great. If they're a bit off the track, keep them to the last 10-15 minutes. We'll try to nail them as best we can. So how can we, in that case, develop ourselves with the tools? What tools do we have? And what our nature really is, we're going to go into a bit of that today, to see how we can, through knowing what our nature is and what it's like influenced by, we can determine actually how we want to develop in all phases of our lives, not just spirituality, but in anything that we want to develop. These things are very, very important. So let's get smashing. And the first topic that we're going to take a look at are actually called, you know what, we're going to read this from the slides. I won't do a lot of work today. We'll just let Bala Salam's writings do the work. And we're going to take a look at a few concepts and a few definitions that we can, that we really need to understand in order to understand ourselves, okay? And so hopefully we'll be going through the slides, and if we can start with the first one. Okay, the 4 factors. Now, these 4 factors, one is the source, the second is the source's development, third is the external factors relating directly to the source, and fourth is the external factors not relating directly to the source. Now, these 4 factors influence everything in our lives, okay? Everything. So, except these 4 things, we don't really have anything to really investigate or to keep an eye out for if we want to develop in anything. And spirituality, of course, for us is creme de la creme. It's what we want to be good at. So we're going to need to understand these 4 things first. So let's start with the source. So the source is the essence of the organism, containing information that defines the essential qualities of the organism. Example, the wheat, the seed, person, genetic makeup. Now, the source is basically, just like it says here, like Bala Salam says, it's our essence, okay? It is what we are. Everything inside that drop of sperm that penetrates the mother's womb has everything in it, all the information, everything that we are going to be in this world, and everything that's inside of us, our essence, our character, all our traits are in that drop. Now, in spirituality, we call that reshimo, okay, which is a spiritual inclination. However, in this world, as you know, like in all the worlds, there's how Bala Salam describes it as, like a stamp. Okay, so every world is a copy of each other, and as we descend to this world, we also have a copy of the spiritual. So what we have here is, although it's called Reshimo, okay, we start our world with that drop in our mother's womb, right? And in that, let's just actually write that there. Okay, so from a drop, whoa, what's going on here? Okay, let's do that. So from a drop, everything is determined, and that's our source. Okay, just like a wheat, okay, or just like a seed of corn, any seed that you plant grows in, everything is embedded in that source, that full information. So that's the most essential thing, because that's going to determine what happens. That's the beginning, actually. When I say that's the most essential thing, it's not the most essential thing. All of these four things together make it essential. However, that is the beginning point. And then the next thing is, if you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you, Bill. The source's development. Okay, now that is the program by which the source develops. It is unchanging, and it defines the organism's state of growth that at every moment of its natural evolution. This is also very obvious to us. Okay, it's like a seed we plant, okay, or even a fruit on a tree. Okay, so when spring comes, or when summer comes, when the season for that fruit comes, we see that a fruit grows on the tree by going through certain phases. All right, so as it goes through phases and it becomes ripe, it has to go through development. And same with us, same with any seed, same with any person. Until a person grows up, it takes years. And until those years happen, the person's developing internally, externally. Our bodies are growing. Our mind is also growing as we develop and we get more experience from life. So just like everything in life, we're developing. And as we go through these phases of development, all our characters and all our traits are taking shape. Okay? So once we come to the age of 20, 20, 25, whatever, all of a sudden, we grow up being a product of the environment that we grew up in, being the influential factor on our essence. Okay? And beyond that, which I just mentioned it actually, but on top of that, we have the third factor. Okay? And the third factor is, Bill, the external factors relating directly to the source are environmental conditions, operating in collaboration with the first two factors in order to bring about the natural evolution of the organism. And as an example, we have wheat, soil, nutrition, air, rain, sunlight. Those are all those things that influence the seed's potential growth in quality and quantity. And then we have a person who has a family, hopefully, location, the method of upbringing, education, schooling, media, and the social influence. So, according to that person's environment, that person becomes a product of society, a product of the environment, just like a seed in the ground that's influenced by all the nutrients, all the benefits of the soil, the water, and the sun, and everything. A person is also feeding off its environment. Okay, we are fed by the environment, good or bad. Okay, as you know, sometimes the soil may not be that great, or there might be drought, there might not be any water, or sometimes there might be, too much rain. Okay, so environmental factors environmental factors influence how our crops grow, and same with a person. Okay, this is pretty straightforward, and Baal Sulam will read in a minute, just put it so straightforward with these examples. It's really amazing how basic and simple it is. That according to the environment, I grow up. According to the environment, I shape how I think. I shape what I believe. I shape how I approach a situation. Everything that I determine in my life all of a sudden becomes the environment's influence on my essence, okay, which phase after phase develops through the influence of that environment. And then all of a sudden I end up at the age of 20, 25, being a final product of the combination of those three things. And obviously from that, it's impossible for me to really say I have any free choice, because I didn't choose my parents, I didn't choose the country I was born in, I didn't choose the religion I was born into, I didn't choose the culture, I didn't choose anything. I was like seemingly dropped in the middle of nowhere without any consciousness, and that middle of nowhere made something out of me. All right? Up to here, this is our situation. All right? So crystal clear. Let's just get to the fourth factor as well, and if you've got any questions, shoot them through. Now, the fourth thing is the external factors not relating directly to the source are environmental occurrences that are not part of the natural evolution of the organism. They can affect significant sudden changes upon the organism, often in an interfering manner. For example, wheat can be growing and there could be hail, earthquake, tornadoes, and a person can get hit by a car or he can win the lottery. Okay? Hurrah! Okay? There you go. It might look pretty interesting to win the lottery, okay? Okay, however, it might also be a very, very big obstacle for someone in spirituality. So, you know, the sages say, be careful what you wish for. So this fourth factor is very, very also important, because I also don't have any influence on it, and all of a sudden I might just find myself, you know, in a situation where I can no longer proceed with development, or I might, you know, all of a sudden cut my development or slow it down. You know, ending up dead is obviously not a very nice thing, especially when you've got a special goal like spirituality to attain. But however, these things are all out of our control. Actually, all four of those things are mostly out of our control, as we learned that we really don't have any free choice. So here comes the big question. Well, before that big question, is there anything that popped up there, Marcos?
Actually, because I wanted to just kind of summarize a few things, because really these four factors that we're talking about now are a follow-on from what we discussed in the last lesson. Not necessarily we, but the EC instructors you got on Sundays. And Michelle from New York asked a question that we could actually, this summary kind of relates directly to your question, where you asked, can a person choose to be kind or harmful to another living creature? So in relation to this, if we just go back to, can I draw on this thing?
Absolutely, mate.
How do we get to the
just
next
draw
page?
on there, you can clear it out. No
Yeah.
problem. Just press it, erase. That's it.
Nice one. So if we go back to what we talked about in the last lesson about free will, what you would have been taught on Sunday. So the first thing we said that innately we're always our inner algorithm that's constantly working on us within human nature, and really which is working on all nature at the still, vegetative, animate and human levels, is that we're always moving away from pain and moving towards pleasure, and that there's no free will in being able to choose pain over pleasure. And within that there's this example of even a masochist, who it's probably the most extreme example of that, of as if a person who prefers pain over pleasure or chooses pain over pleasure, even there, if we really look deep into the intentions of such a person, we'll see that they really are getting pleasure out of the fact that they're doing some kind of either physical pain or some other kind of pain to themselves, and that we're always trying to move towards pleasure and move away from pain. This is one thing. And we're not free in that. We have to choose pleasure over pain. If we're given pleasure and pain on two platters and we're told, you know, there you go, choose which one, we can't choose. We're always going to move towards the pleasure. That's basically the situation with that. That's the most innate calculation. And then we went through a few more things that we won't really write down here about how humans are different to animals, but at the end of the day, humans aren't really different to animals, meaning that Baruch Salam talked about in the article, The Freedom, how humans can calculate pleasure in the future, whereas animals have this instinctive drive to always find pleasure in the present. and that's what differentiates the two. But then he also continued and said, but at the end of the day, since we're still just choosing pleasure for ourselves over the pain all the time, we're still not really exercising any free choice, and there is no real difference to humans or animals in how we're going after the pleasure there. It's just that humans can have this additional computer in our minds that lets us do all kinds of things to find some kind of pleasure in the future and agree to some kind of present suffering in order to get that pleasure in the future. So that was in the last lesson. You can always go back to that to get into more details about it. And then another major point was that the society we are in determines the type of pleasure that we go for. So if I'm wanting to be a lawyer, for instance, and I really look into where that's coming from, we'll see that in my upbringing there's been all kinds of points of influence upon me in order to influence me to become a lawyer. And there's all kinds of examples of, for example, feral children who are raised without any human beings around them, and they're raised by animals, and they turn out to be just like animals because that's the whole social influence upon them. That's the environmental influence, and it determines the type of pleasure they go for. So each of us born into a different area of society, according to the values of the family and of the society at large we're in. So that influences the kinds of everything we do, from how we sit, how we eat, how we drink, and to all kinds of occupations and jobs we have, to how we spend our time, etc., etc. Now what we continued with is the 4 factors. So where does this 4 factors come in? The 4 factors is really, we're still not getting to a point where we're free, but the 4 factors is defining how nature has set up this situation where both internally, the first 2 factors, the source and the source's development, defines how internally we're completely controlled by those first 2 factors, meaning we don't choose what genes we have, nor do we choose that predefined plan that we have. We can't choose how tall we are at age 3, or how much we weigh as soon as we're born, and whether or not we're going to start going bald at age 30 or 40 or not. These things are all embedded into the programming. But so these are 2 things that are determined from within. And then the other 2 factors, factors 3 and 4, those external factors that influence us, are environmental factors influencing us from the outside. One, it's a naturally embedded one into meaning that factors 1 and 2 can't get by without factor number 3, which is, as we said, for the wheat. By the way, the wheat is the example that Bala Sulam gives. On pages 377 onwards in the article The Freedom, you'll be able to read about these 4 factors and these concepts in much more detail. And Bala Sulam is giving the wheat as an example throughout those 4 factors, and says that with the 3rd factor, the external factors relating directly to the source and its development. So with that's the wheat cannot develop if it doesn't have its environment that supports it, that supplies it with the soil, the nutrients, the rain, the necessary wind, the sunlight that it gets. Without all these factors combined with those first 2 factors, it cannot grow. And it's the same with us too. We're born into a family. We're born, at least to a mother that's taking care of us. And you see how for humans, how much care and we need when we're first born. And then we're raised into a society. We're raised through all kinds of education, through all kinds of schooling that gives us all kinds of knowledge and values, and we keep getting raised like this. The media influences us, society influences us, and that determines how we function. That determines all these types of pleasure that we go for and this form that we become. And then the 4th factor is merely saying that, we also can't choose whether or not tomorrow some kind of accident happens to us, and either it could be more of you could say a negative accident, like something that puts us in hospital, like getting hit by a car, or it could be something you could as if say more positive. There's lots of examples of how winning the lottery isn't so positive, but meaning that if you go and look it up, you'll see that lots of people end up taking their own lives even after winning the lottery, because they suddenly don't know what to do with this new situation that suddenly come to them. but it appears to us as if it's positive, and it's something that you can't choose tomorrow whether or not you're winning the lottery. If you put in for it and you're one of a few million people who've put in for it, and you win, then that could be like a sudden change to your life that'll influence you. But anyway, the principle of those 4 factors is that this is how nature has really. This is nature's cage on us, these 4 factors. And these 4 factors determine all our physical characteristics at any given moment, and they also determine all of our thoughts and desires at any given moment. We're really defining the cage by which nature has us in. Baal HaSulam gives the example in the article, The Freedom, that it's like nature has us like the clay in the potter's hand with these 4 factors. So we're really getting to the nuts and bolts of how we don't have free will in all of this. And so when you ask this question, can a person choose to be kind or harmful to another living creature? We can make the choice, but it's not a free choice according to all these things we've learned, because that choice will be always based on me wanting to go for pleasure over pain. So if it's more pleasurable for me to be kind to another person or another living creature, so obviously I'm going to be kinder to the person. If it's more pleasurable for me to be harmful to another living creature, so I'm going to be harmful to another living creature. This is simply the situation. And what determines what's pleasurable, whether to be kind or whether to be harmful is pleasurable? Society. That's what determines what's pleasurable. So according to how I've been raised, according to the society I've been in and the values that have been instilled in me throughout all my life, and according to all that development of the 4 factors that I've been brought up into, so that determines whether or not I'm going to be kind or harmful to another living creature. That determines whether it's pleasurable for me to be either kind or harmful. If now, for example, I was born and raised in a family which had all these, like you could say, your normal family values, where it's good to be kind to others, and so I'm always going to be going from that outlook, and I'm always going to be aiming to be kind to others through that, and I see that as being pleasurable. If I'm raised in a situation, let's say I'm born into some kind of extremist family where I'm taught from the get-go that I need to be kind to these people and I need to be harmful to these people. So obviously I'm going to be raised in a mindset where now when I go and meet these people over here, it's more pleasurable for me to be harmful to them, because that's what I've been raised to believe. And we see these examples in the world. Just go to the world news section right now and you can see all the different examples of that. So this really leaves us with the question, where do we have the free will, which brings us to the whole next part of what we're talking about.
Absolutely. So there we go. We don't have any free will, but we'll get to having free will. Okay, there was a nice little article, actually interview with Mother Teresa, in case you guys remember. Okay, and they asked her during her interview, I think it was a BBC interview, they said, why do you help so much? And she said, well, it makes me feel good. Okay, so we're all going through that feel good or feel bad kind of cycle. So here we go. Now, how are we going to develop that free will? Okay, so for that we need something very special called the dot in the heart. Okay, so if we don't have a dot in the heart, and if I'm stuck in this structure of four factors, there's really nothing to talk about anyone. Okay, person just goes and floats or is in the winds of life like a leaf and goes from one place to another. So for us, the important thing is, in order for us to make some kind of determination, what we need is something called the dot in the heart. Okay? So that's us. That's the real me according to spirituality, the dot in the heart. And our beast, our corporeal body, like Marcos said, rightfully so, that it's actually an animal. Okay, we don't really relate to our physical body as man. It's just an animal. With a little tail to it too as well. Okay, this is the human in us. And until we have this dot in the heart, there's nothing really to talk about. And this is our body, also in Kabbalah known as the beast. Okay, so if we don't have a dot in the heart, we're just going to go for pleasure or pain, and we're just going to develop with the 4 factors of life, going through our personal development until that dot in the heart awakens. Now, when that dot in the heart awakens, then we have something to talk about, because then we're in a bit of a split, aren't we? Now, if society, like Marcos said a minute ago, if society determines, if the environment that I grew up in determines what's pleasurable and what's painful, and I grow up according to that, when I have a dot in the heart, I'm also going to need some kind of an influence for me to choose something that the dot in the heart wants. Now, the important thing we need to remember here is, even though we have a dot in the heart, it's still a desire to receive. Okay, remember, from our previous lessons, we said that our essence is a desire to receive. This will never change. That's our material. Okay, but now, because we've gone through these phases of development and have come to a conclusion that no matter what I desire in life, what my corporeal desires are, even if I get them, I'm always going to end up feeling empty. All right, so if I'm feeling empty all the time, even though I get what I want, and then finally this dot in the heart awakens, then I'm in this split, because then I can say, well, I've got a desire to receive, I want to fulfill myself with pleasure, but then on the other hand, I've got this desire also that wants to find out the purpose of life, what I need to live for in life. Who am I? What am I? Okay? So between that split, now I can make a choice. Okay? And where exactly is the choice? And right, Marcos said rightfully so a minute ago that the choice is in society. Okay? And this is also what Baal Islam is explaining to us in his book, which we're going to look at in a minute. So what I need to determine if the society that I grow up in, or that I'm living in, existing in, tells me that receiving is good for you, getting what you want in life is great, be a winner, then I end up being like what the society tells me. We're competitive, we want to get what we want, and we don't really care about what others, well, we do care about what others think, but we don't really care what happens to them when we're trying to get what we want. Okay, we try to go on top of everyone, regardless of what's going to happen to them. Thus, we have a world situation of chaos, because this is what the environment is telling me to do. Now, when the dot in the heart awakens, and you have this urge for the meaning of life, you'll probably end up coming to one of our lessons, okay? Because if you're searching, at the end of the day, the Creator does bring a person who really is genuinely searching for the meaning of life to Kabbalah. And then the Kabbalists explain to us that this dot in the heart is something very special. And it wants to find the source that it created it. And as we study the sources, the Kabbalists say, listen, this dot in the heart is an attribute that belongs to our Maker, also known as the Creator, or some people like to call him God, all right? However, this dot in the heart wants to get back and connect with the source of life. And the source of life, the Creator, his attribute is bestowal. He's loving. Well, at least that's what the Kabbalists say, because we don't see much of that relationship in this world. But the reason we don't see it in this world, that we see a lot of bad things in this world, is for that dot in the heart to awaken to want the good. And this is where our freedom of choice can actually happen. That from this emptiness of this world, my dot in the heart awakens, and now I can actually want the good from this bad state. And the good is where this dot in the heart wants to pull me to. And here I'm in a split. This is why we have this split that I drew here. This whole idea of being in this, this dilemma okay, of whether I'm going to fulfill this or fulfill this. This is where the dilemma then begins, with this inclination. So the society, just like it influences my animal here, it also needs to influence my dot in the heart so I can have a free choice. Am I going to choose the society that influences my animal? Or am I going to choose a society that influences the human in me? And that is the question, as Shakespeare would have said if he studied Kabbalah. Okay? Really, that is the question. And this is our dilemma, because society doesn't really give us the inclination to bestow out there. The society gives us the desires to want things. So if I have an inclination to bestow from the Creator, I'm going to have to choose a society where other people, just like myself, want to get to that attribute of bestowal. Because bestowal, although it's appreciated in society, nobody really goes for it. We just don't. We're egoists, okay? So I need a strong society and environment that can facilitate my spiritual growth. And as Kabbalists explained to us, there's 3 factors that I need to really incorporate. Well, 3, let's say, forces that I need to incorporate around me in order for that dot in the heart to develop. And those are, let's just write them very easily here. 1 is a guide or a teacher, or that wonderful person we like to call the Rav. Okay, Dr. Michael Lightman. So you know he teaches the morning lesson every day. So we need someone who's been through this dilemma and who's got experience and who knows what he's doing and what he's talking about. That's the first thing. Second thing is we need sources like the books we have from Bala Sulam and Rabash, the Zohar, books, articles, things that explain to us what we're actually going through. I mean, just think about it. If Bala Sulam hadn't written this article, The Freedom of Will, we'd never know what we were going through. At least now, with this article, okay, it's not a holy book, it's just a basic article that talks about what we're going through in life. If he hadn't written that, maybe we'd be dwelling in this for, I don't know, for another 200 years, thinking what's going on with us. Okay? So these books and articles are very important for us to come to a conscious understanding of what's going on through us. And third of all, most important, well, one of the most equally important, are people who are going to make this really, a good experience. I'm going to hang out with the boys, I'm going to hang out with my friends or whatever, and that's called the group, also known as my buddies, okay, or friends, okay, people who have the same inclination as me. And I'd like to value that very much because we don't find a lot of them around. So friends are very, very important. And if I want to advance in spirituality, I'm going to need those friends. I'm going to need their support, and I'm going to need to support them as well. And actually, that choice, whether I want to support them, help them or not, is a very critical factor in choosing bestowal or reception. So that environment, all these things that come together in order to influence me, bring me to freedom of will, really, to free choice. Do I want to help others advance towards the purpose of life, or do I just want things for me? Okay? Now we're going to read something from Bala Sulam. It's on page 383 in the book, if you got it. If not, we'd like the slide. Okay, thank you, Bill. So, we can always supplement in the matter of choosing our environment, which are the friends, books, teachers, and so on. It's like a person who inherited a few stalks of wheat from his father. From this small amount, he can grow dozens of stalks through his choice of the environment for his source, which is fertile soil with all the necessary minerals and raw materials that nourish the wheat abundantly. There is also the matter of the work of improving the environmental conditions to fit the needs of the plant and the growth. For the wise will do well to choose the best conditions and will find blessing. And the fool will take from whatever comes before him and will thus turn the sowing to a curse rather than to a blessing. And thus all its praise and spirit depends on the choice of the environment in which to sow the wheat. But once it has been sown in the selected location, the wheat's absolute shape is determined according to the measure that the environment is capable of providing. So is the case with our topic. For it is true that the desire has no freedom. Rather, it is operated by the above four factors, and one is compelled to think and examine as they suggest, denied of any strength to criticize or change, as the wheat that has been sown in its environment. Okay, by Kabbalist Yehuda Ashlag, also known as Baal Sulam. So, the environment, although is a critical factor in my choice of developments, Baal Sulam says something very, very critical here, which we might not have grasped in our first time reading, right? But he says, listen guys, although you brought your dot in the heart and you kind of, sowed it into this environment here, this is not going to be enough. He says you have to now look after that seed. You have to, it's like farming, right? It's not enough I just sow it into good fertile land. I know there's water around and everything. I still have to keep an eye on the stuff, all right? I have to maybe, go around, check out the humidity. I need to check out if I need to add extra water or not. I need to check out the soil, that everything is okay. Sometimes they work on the land even after planting the seeds. So it means I constantly have to work on this environment to make it stronger and stronger and stronger, so that its influence on me constantly gets stronger, stronger, and stronger. The reason I do this is for one very good reason, actually, which we also learned in our previous lessons, because in the phases of development, what happens is this. In the phases of development, we really have two paths, okay? One is known as the path of suffering, and the other one is known as the path of light. Okay, we also touched on this, I do believe. Okay, so you can go in a slow, unconscious way by getting beaten up by life, or by suffering, as we like to say, or you can make a choice where you can speed up your development in the right environment without feeling the suffering. Okay, I say without feeling the suffering because I want to emphasize here that some people say, can I change my destiny? You cannot change the process of development. It's already done deal, set. What I can change and influence in this life is how I can develop nicely, like a good boy who studies at school really well and gets good grades and he's like, flying, or like a bad boy who's lazy, he doesn't want to get things done, and he just gets harassed by life, ends up being nothing. Okay? Two ways to live, two ways to develop spiritually, just like in this world. It's right, it's not rocket science. Okay? So all we have to do, therefore, is not just choose the right environment for our spiritual growth for the purpose of life only, but however, also try our best to make it stronger all the time. And obviously that's going to come with experience, it's going to come with involvement. And actually today, at the end of the lesson, don't miss it out, we've got a really nice announcement that will be great for practical advancement in spirituality. Till there, do we have any questions there, Marcos?
There's a couple, but I'll also just add a couple of things to this.
Sure, I was just going to write here suffering. Oops.
also want to draw there too. So.
Oh, okay, you know what I shall do? I will bestow on you, mate, and let you take it all. Okay.
So that's exactly the space I wanted to draw in.
There you go, I read it all.
So just on this point, it's basically just saying another few words in relation to the same points, but I think it's worthwhile because it's such a complicated topic, and it's important getting a nice, clear vision of it as much as possible. So one of the things here is that when we're talking about society at large, this whole point that we started talking about now is that, up until this whole section of this lesson, from the last 2 lessons, we've been saying that there's no free choice. There's no free choice. But obviously, even if you tell any person in the world that there's no free choice, there's still going to be something inside them going, no, there has to be free choice. It's the way we're made, because we're a desire to receive pleasure, and it's not pleasurable to say that you're completely a slave and you have no choice in being a complete slave. So just because of our nature, which is a will to receive pleasure, we're always going to be saying that we do have a choice. Otherwise, if we don't have a choice, then we have no entity, we have no me. We're just completely, no different to this rock over there, and we want to be different. We want to be me. We want to feel as if I exist. That I can't exist if I don't have a choice. So with this situation, it's very interesting, because now when we get to this part of the lesson, we're saying that a person who has a point in the heart has this prerequisite to really get to the depths of what that free choice is. And this is very important, because now we're actually differentiating all these people who have this desire for spirituality, a point in the heart, from people who don't have a point in the heart. And that's something very difficult to discern. Only each person within themselves can discern whether they have that or not. How do I discern whether or not I have a point in the heart? And we've talked about this since the introductory lecture. I discern that I have a point in the heart in that all these desires on the still, vegetative, inanimate levels for food, sex, family, money, honor, control, knowledge, that I'm still living integrated with those desires. I'm still feeling them shooting up in me all the time. And I'm still going for those pleasures in all kinds of ways. And still feeling pleasures from them. But, in addition to all that, I'm feeling some kind of additional empty space that can't be fulfilled by those pleasures. Some kind of additional question of why. What's the meaning behind all these pleasures? There's this additional desire in me that's not being fulfilled by all those pleasures, and that's what makes me search. That's why it's called a desire for spirituality. It's making me search into this unknown space. It's making me go into all these different environments, whether that environment is a book that I'm picking up and reading about philosophy, science, or some other kind of methods, spirituality, religions, all kinds of things, in order to try to find what's the meaning of all these things, whether it's going to some groups and practicing all kinds of techniques and methods and searching there for answers to these kinds of questions. I'm searching for this additional fulfillment that food, sex, family, money, honor, control, knowledge isn't giving me. I'm searching for spiritual fulfillment. That's the definition of a person with a point in the heart. So here we're saying that only such a person can agree to all these things that we've talked about up until now, that there's no choice in choosing pleasure over pain. There's no choice in those 4 factors, that we're completely controlled and governed by those 4 factors at every single moment. Why can a person agree that there's no choice in these things? Because then we bring this new thing that comes from having a point in the heart. And when you have a point in the heart, then the choice becomes in the moving towards a different goal to all the goals of those other pleasures. So all those other pleasures are defined with this goal, reception, as being the pleasure. That if I'm receiving, and that's where all these desires on the still, vegetative, inanimate, or as you could say, food, sex, family, money, honor, control, knowledge, or all those pleasures, that's what the society all around me is promoting to me at every moment. Just, I can say as well, just from, this is an example that's living in me right now, because I deal with this in my day job. I had to look at all kinds of top 40 music videos. where they're getting all the most views out of everything else, like on the internet. Most listens, most views, and what are you seeing there? It's all these values of getting money, going to parties, having fun, having a good time with people. And if it's a song that's a bit more emotional, it's in relation to basically not getting the pleasures that I want. So a person starts kind of crying about the pleasures he's not getting, like that he's feeling alone in this situation where everyone else is getting pleasure and he's not, or something to do with a relationship that didn't go well. I wanted pleasure there but didn't get it. This other person doesn't love me, so they're singing about that. And this is like really a projection of all the kinds of pleasures we want in society. Everyone's saying that you feel more pleasure by getting more money, you feel more pleasure by getting more respect, you feel more pleasure by partying more, you feel more pleasure by doing all these things. That's more or less a projection of the kinds of values society gives us, society at large, that the more you receive for yourself, the more pleasure you feel. So with the point in the heart, also before we get to the point in the heart, so if I don't have a point in the heart, and this is also a very important point for us, because especially for someone who's a beginner now in the wisdom of Kabbalah, we suddenly start learning about these concepts, and then we have our friends who don't have a point in the heart, and we go and meet with those friends, and we want to start telling them about all these concepts we're learning. And suddenly you start getting slapped in the face by your friends because you're starting to tell your friends, hey, we don't have free will, and you're trying to explain to them how we don't have free will. And then suddenly you'll get all these knockbacks. Why? Because we're trying to explain to people who don't have this additional desire and who only have reception as being the source of pleasure, that they don't have free will. So what you actually see, and it's very interesting too, because we also have videos up on YouTube, our own videos, explaining free will. And if you go to the comments there, and you'll see many people in this point will always justify reception as pleasure as being their free will. That if I'm getting all the money I want in the world, I'm free. If I'm living my life the way I want it, and I'm not confined to some kinds of things, then I'm free. That's called free for me. I'm able to make a choice to do this today. I'm able to wake up in the morning and choose cornflakes, which is what I like, over something I don't like. That's free for me. That's my free choice. And that's enough for people, and that's correct, because if they don't have an additional desire other than that, if they're finding fulfillment in these things, so that's exactly the place they are now, and they're not going to accept any other opinion in addition to that. The only people who can accept an opinion in addition to that is those who've been given an additional desire, and they can already see that there's, at the end of the day, that here, where there's pleasure only from reception, all these pleasures, there's a problem with them, which we also talked about in the introductory lecture. The problem with them is that they're all transient, and they ultimately leave us unfulfilled. All these pleasures don't lead to any true, lasting fulfillment. That we can never be truly fulfilled if we're just trying to fulfill myself all the time. So that's one of the reasons that we innately feel that there's a problem with this whole setup that we're in, and we thus, with this point in the heart that we've been kind of given from within, we search for other kinds of fulfillment, spiritual ones, and then we go, and what are we learning here? What's all this whole thing about the teacher, books, and the group, and this environment that we're part of? So here we learn that bestowal is pleasure. That that bestowal is that quality of nature, that nature is a quality of love and bestowal, and that if we learn how to become equal with that quality, then we will feel a whole different and new kind of pleasure that we never felt at the level of reception. And it will solve this problem of transience, because that is an eternal pleasure. We'll literally feel eternal pleasure if we attain that. So you could just say, that we're getting to the source of what's creating these pleasures. And this pen thing is quite dope. It's one of the many corruptions of this world. Okay.
Right, that's a pleasure for you.
That is a pleasure.
Okay, not very pleasurable to read, but you get the message.
Okay, so, and then we start talking about, okay, so how do we do that? But the main principle of this whole arena now, where now our point in the heart brings us to this new environment that's starting to tell us that through acquiring this new quality, bestowal, we'll feel pleasure, and a whole different, new, eternal kind of pleasure. So the whole principle there is that now we're in a situation where we still have our will to receive pleasure being our whole nature, and we always want to receive pleasure for myself. But we're in this environment and that environment is composed of three elements, that being the teacher, the Rav, the books, the Kabbalistic books and articles that explain to us about how to acquire that quality of bestowal, and also the group of other like-minded people, other people with points in the heart, who are aspiring towards that same goal, who are aspiring towards reaching this state of bestowal as well, and who can support each other in that, etc. So while we're in this environment that's literally not going according to what I explained with all this top 40 stuff, with getting more money and getting more this and getting more that as being more pleasurable, but which is literally saying that by giving, by bestowing, by learning how to love and bestow the same way as nature love and bestows us, and getting to that level of existence, but that will truly feel a whole new pleasure that fulfills us infinitely, that we have no lacks at all once we attain that state. The problem is that we still are in the process of attaining it, and we still only have our egos within. So on the one hand, we have this environment outside me now, this society, which is saying that the type of pleasure we need to go for is bestowal. And within me, my own inner nature has no inclination and no understanding and no feeling of what it means to feel pleasure in bestowal. If it did, so the whole of society would already be in bestowal. But we have these two opposites. And that's exactly the place where we get free will then. Free will, because if we come to the point where we can make this action of bestowal, or more correctly, the action in spirituality is an intention. When we can come to a point of making that intention to bestow, that becomes our one free action. Why? Because we cannot perceive any pleasure for myself in such an action. So this is where we come to a point of using all these means around me, the teacher, the book, the group, the teacher, the books, and the group, to inspire and to increase the motivation and the dedication towards such a goal of reaching bestowal, because it's the most meaningful and truthful goal in existence. And by moving towards that and coming to actually attain living within that intention to bestow, by doing so, we develop these whole two levels of existence living simultaneously. That the ego still stays there and is still always wanting the things for itself. And above that, we discover this whole new level of reality, the reality of bestowal, being able to perceive through a whole new sense of bestowal. Other than the five senses which are constantly absorbing, we develop this whole new sense. As Mutlu said, we plant that new sense which starts just as this point in the heart, where it's still unclarified. The point in the heart in the beginning, as we said, it's just this feeling of dissatisfaction with all the other pleasures in the world. Then we plant that into this new society, we plant that into the teacher, the books, the group, and they work on it. And in return, we work towards them. We work to cultivate that environment. And then that's this whole process that continues like this. And it thus grows into a whole new sense. It grows into what we call a kli for the attainment of spirituality.
Also known as a soul, guys.
But yeah, I'm rambling on a bit, but we get to some of your questions now. Michelle from New York also asked before, where does responsibility for our actions come into play?
Well, this is exactly where it comes into play. If I choose the right society, and if we all think about it, we're all part of a big system, right? We're all included in this thing called creation. And all of us with all the good and the bad and the weird things in it, have to understand that we're all part of this system. So our responsibility is actually making that good choice so we can advance towards the purpose of creation. Because remember, in our previous lessons, we've learned that we're all living in an interconnected system. So if one of us makes the right decision to advance into the purpose of creation and goes in that direction for correction, to be in a higher, better level of consciousness, he or she influences everybody else. So, yep, that's our responsibility. Now, from your question, we come to another very, very important aspect of our spiritual development. It works out that only the people who have a dot in the heart are responsible. So for all the good and all the bad that happens in the world, well, guess who's responsible? We are, because only we've got freedom of choice. It's also something to think about, guys.
Fabio from Susa is asking, if a person gets hit by a car, it touches a delicate issue regarding destiny. Can we assume that we create our destiny through free will, or it's already written?
Our destiny, everything that we're going to go through, is fixed, as we learned in the 3 phases, right? When the Creator created the whole of reality, He already thought about everything from before. All we have to do is just live it, okay? We're just living it, actually. So we're not really deciding what's going to happen. So somebody who studies spirituality is not really, looked after, especially. He can still die, he can still have illnesses, he can have accidents. These things happen. But we have to understand here one thing. A lot of things also depend on that overall system. Everything depends on the overall system. We're all parts of that. So everything that happens to us is really for the development of that system. There's no death really in spirituality. We'll come to study that in the future, hopefully. But there is no death, especially for a person who's advancing in spirituality with Kabbalah. Death becomes this, this just becomes something irrelevant for you, because you begin to understand where your development is.
Rabash was saying how death is like changing a shirt.
Yeah, it's like...
That's what it's like for a Kabbalist.
Yeah, old shirt, chuck it in the bin, get a new one. Doesn't sound so bad.
In relation to that as well, Francisco from Sao Paulo in Brazil is asking, does our soul after death have some choice on its next incarnation?
Absolutely not. Once again, that destiny is a fixed game, guys. We just have to live it through, okay?
Elise from Australia, do we all have a point in the heart? And if I do not, can I make one because I see another's spirituality?
That's a very nice question. Everybody actually has a dot in the heart, okay? Everyone. The question is, has it awakened? Okay, and that's the important thing. Baal HaSulam writes about this. He says, if a person without a dot in the heart is included and takes part in the activities of people who do have a dot in the heart and are aspiring for these spiritual goals, he can really speed up that process as well, because he becomes part of that wagon, right? And as long as he's on the wagon with them, he'll be influenced, and that will increase his speed of development, and thus will awaken that dot in the heart, hopefully. So Baal HaSulam actually writes about this. This is why we also have our children, our families also involved in everything that we do. We don't know if our kids have a dot in the heart or not. We don't. They're kids. They grow up in our society, though, but the more we participate, they participate with us, actually, we see that there's a lot of positive changes in them. The way they look at life, the way they react to life, the way they kind of mingle amongst each other. We see that, according to the kids on the street outside, they have a different approach, which is pretty much like a copy-paste of how we approach things.
Apollos from Peru is asking very important questions here that it's very important that we clarify them. I'll ask them both. He's saying, how is it going to be clear-cut? Somehow we still need to keep contact with the beastly society, even if only for reasons of work, business, or just for for twin souls to grow together, as he writes here, to find a partner. He's also writing here in another question, it's not like creating a sort of monastic way of where we end up neglecting the rest of this soul that we're in. And he says, Adam's seed from which we're a part of, to help awaken the point in the heart, etc., etc. So
a very, very good question. Okay, actually, I was just going to mention to Marcos when he was drawing this bestowal is pleasure and reception is pleasure according to two different societies. We sometimes have this fear, right? Because spirituality is giving, and I'm thinking to myself, well, if I give, how am I going to live? What am I going to do? Who's going to look after me? Okay, we all have this fear, and it's a nice question. What am I going to do with the way the world is currently going? Well, we participate in that too. Like Marcos said, it's like I've got two lives. Okay, it's like I have my corporeal life. I go to work. We all go to work here, by the way. Every Kabbalist in the past, they all had a job. All right, there was no Kabbalist on the dole. All right, we all had a job. We all have a job here too. We all have families. We all have kids. I've got a kid. Marcos got a kid. Everybody has a family. Okay, we participate in all these activities because it is requirement of this world. I can't just cut this world off and create for myself a temple on the mountaintop, like you say here. All right, so I participate in the necessities of this world. I have to feed myself, so I do work. I have to look after my family. I've got to make sure they're safe and well. I've got to make sure they've got shelter. Okay, so I take care of the necessities, and I'll just draw here myself. Can I just borrow that pen, mate? Okay, so here, okay, when I'm in this split, okay, between my dot in the heart and my corporeal life, okay, and I'm taking care of my beast, I take care of his necessities. They're okay. So what's a necessity for you in the place where you live is your decision. You decide. In Kabbalah, we don't tell people you should eat 3 meals a day and that's it. No. You decide what your necessities is. You decide what your necessities are for your family as well. So yes, you need to work, you need to make money, you need to buy food, you need to buy clothes, you need to have a shelter, etc., etc., etc. You need those things, so take care of them. And that's actually before spirituality. Before spirituality, you make sure that this animal is a happy chap. Okay, let's put a smile on his face. All right, there you go. Okay, so we don't want him suffering. Suffering is not the purpose of life. So let him have a good normal life. But on top of providing the necessities to him, I add everything else. Add else to spirituality. Don't think that you're going to be hungry or left out or have a miserable life because we're bestowing. It's not true at all. I'll tell you from experience. You know what happens when you develop spiritually? Your mindset changes so much. You look at your life and all of a sudden you see so many things that you were dealing with before, and now it's like growing up and they become so irrelevant. There was such a nice article the other day I read that people who actually start to get rid of the junk in their lives end up being so much more happy. I had this article and it says this: I chucked all my unnecessary books and I now have like 10 books on my shelf, right? And he said, I chucked all the clothes that I don't need and I just have, like the basic things I like to wear, and that's it. And I chucked all the televisions and everything out, and now I just have my computer. I look at what I need to look at, what I want to look at, what I want to know from the internet, and just kind of like it's like a quiet life. And actually we see that humanity is getting there. All right, it was a really interesting article because this is actually how we live. We leave so much of the junk behind as you study Kabbalah, and it's voluntarily because I'm not limiting myself. I just see what these unnecessary things in my life are. And I just say, you know what, I don't need this stuff. And I just let it go. And that's really an amazing revelation for all of us. We just, used to look at our lives and having 1,000 compact discs in my house, which I never get to listen to anyway, and just say, you know what, just get rid of all of that junk. And you begin to do that voluntarily, and your life becomes so simple and peaceful. Okay? That's a process. And this is what happens as we develop spiritually. We give more importance to spirituality, and so we don't feel like we're losing out on our corporeal lives at all. We still, look after ourselves and our families and have our necessities, and those just change as we mature up. Just like kids want to have 1,001 toys, but as they grow up, they don't use any of them. Same with us. We have, as adults, a bunch of toys we really don't use and want. And as we grow up, we understand they're just not there. They're just not necessities.
Okay. Tammy from Austin, Texas is asking, once we have free will, does it ever go away? Can we lose our point in the heart?
Ooh, well, look, sometimes, people come to the group. They work and, they stay with us. And sometimes they leave, okay? They say, you know what? I just don't think it's the right thing for me. And that's okay. There's no problem with that. People come, people go, it's okay. But Bala Salam says that, once a person loses that contact, he goes back into the desire to receive. He goes back into the regular society. So you don't really have much free choice there. Actually, a person who studies Kabbalah and goes back to living the way he was before, he's always got this grunt. So if I'm in the hands of society, I don't have choice. Here as well, when you're in the hands of a spiritual society, your choice is actually choosing that society. It's not what I do in there, because once I'm in society, I just flow with it. The thoughts that come to me are from the society. The actions I do are what the society pushes onto me, necessitates me to do. I don't have free choice there. Free choice is where I want to develop. So just choosing the environment isn't enough. I have to make myself stronger in that environment. And in order to make myself stronger in that environment, I have to make sure that the environment gets stronger all the time. That's my free choice. Investing in my environment is my free choice.
Joyce from Florida, 2 questions related. What is the concern with suicide for those in chronic physical or mental pain if it's just like changing a shirt? And are there repercussions for hitting the game over button?
Guys, there are no punishments or rewards for the things that happen in this world, except for a guy who's in spirituality, because he's just living a process. He is going through experiences. Obviously, suicide is not good, okay, because it's like I have an opportunity to live and make things happen and advance, and I kill myself. It's not a good idea, all right? So in terms of situations like that, we have to think of the overall system. Also, look, if in our world there's a lot of people who are mentally sick, who are physically disabled, but we have to remember that the whole system is a system that pushes humanity to development by suffering. Actually, we're developing by, the life pushing us by suffering. So we have to understand that the suffering is kind of an aiding force for us to develop. So we might have been in those situations in our previous lives, and we, all of a sudden in this reincarnation, in this awakening, let's say, because of that accumulation of suffering, start asking about the meaning of life. So it will be the same for those people as well. So we're going through a development phase, and so we shouldn't really look at it from one angle and think, wow, that's really bad. We have to think of the overall picture and take a more holistic approach to the overall creation and its purpose and development phases.
And again, it seems as if you're searching for some kind of morals or ethics here, and the wisdom of Kabbalah isn't an ethically based system. It's all based on nature and its laws. For an example, I had a very good friend of mine in the past who did commit suicide, and he's a person who had all kinds of mental problems, and all his life was very much struggling until it reached a point where he did that, and I meet with his parents from time to time and we speak. And you just see, like, when we're looking at it from this perspective, we see just how much it's a natural process here. And at the end of the day, you just see how it's not that he did anything ethically right or wrong and that he did it. You simply see how this same algorithm working on us, that to always move towards pleasure and move away from pain, pushed him to a situation where he could do nothing but choose pleasure over pain. And when the pain of existing became way too much for this, this is the direction that he took. And it's like this is really the whole basis. It's no different here. It's a whole natural process. The problem with such a things with suicide is that at the end of the day, we're saying that the goal of creation, why does we say it's not good? And also this relates to another question, Hernan from Philippines, saying is there such a thing as good or bad in spirituality, which also touches on this whole thing of ethics. There's no such thing. Good and bad mean good if it's leading us to the goal, and bad if it's not leading us to the goal. That's basically what it comes down to in terms of good or bad. So committing suicide, it's simply an action where at the end of the day, what did we learn in the first lesson? That the goal of creation is the revelation of the Creator, meaning of this quality of love and bestowal, while we're living here in this world. So at the end of the day, we still have to come to that. So a person who, it's like stopping it's making a certain stoppage at a point where there's corrections that we can be undergoing while we're living here. So this is the whole problem with it, that it's not conducive to the goal. But at the end of the day, we also see, there's the double calculation here, that a person who does that in such a situation does it out of no choice. That at the end of the day, like any decisions any person's making in life at every moment, there's the choice of pleasure over pain ultimately governing over us. Maybe there was just like one last excerpt we needed to read before we...
Absolutely, the last slide. Page 383, paragraph 4 from the freedom. There is freedom for the will to initially choose such an environment, such books, and such guides that impart to him good concepts. If one does not do that, but is willing to enter any environment that appears to him and read any book that falls into his hands, he is bound to fall into a bad environment or waste his time on worthless books which are abundant and easier to come by. In consequence, he will be forced into foul concepts that make him sin and condemn. He will certainly be punished not because of his evil thoughts or deeds, in which he has no choice, but because he did not choose to be in a good environment, for in that there is definitely a choice. Therefore, he who strives to continually choose a better environment is worthy of praise and reward, but he too, it is not because of his good thoughts and deeds, which come to him without his choice, but because of his effort to acquire a good environment which brings him these good thoughts and deeds. It is as Rabbi Yehusha ben Perachaya said, make yourself a Rav and buy yourself a friend. All right, also from Baal Islam's Freedom article. So this is where our only free choice is. So if we want to make things better, we better make a better choice environment. Now, I do believe we have a video clip, but before that, do we have announcements?
Yeah, well, a few announcements, and then we'll lead out with the video clip where Rav Leitman talks about this topic a little bit more. As usual, our next lesson, it's this coming Wednesday, May the 20th, at the same time, same place. So we look forward to seeing you there. And in terms of this whole topic that we're getting into now, it's very much connected with what we started talking about a couple of weeks ago, that we have a convention coming up in North America. There you go, the one convention, one Kabbalah convention. One because we all feel as one when we come to these conventions. And that's taking place on July 24th to 26th in New Jersey, in a city called Parsippany in New Jersey. It'll be 3 days of lessons. Rav Leitman will be there. There'll be all kinds of Kabbalistic music, activities, and more. And there'll also be a lesson or event on the Thursday night before the convention starts, so you can plan your arrangements accordingly. And the website and the registration will be open very, very shortly, within the next day or 2 days or so. So keep an eye out, and we'll keep you updated with that. And as we were always saying, that in order to really experience that environment, as we said, the teacher, the Rav, the books, and the groups, all working in one place of promoting and raising the importance of this bestowal to us, really there's no better place than going to a convention to experience all of that as one inclusive environment all in one place. And Don't think that you're not ready for it or anything like that because you're in fundamentals. We have many examples of friends last year who came from fundamentals and went through it and said it was, everyone only says positive things about it from what we're hearing, and just not just positive, but really that it's something that has such a deep effect on people to really see that such an environment even exists, an environment like no other, where everyone's supporting each other and coming to raise this importance of such a quality of bestowal above everything else, and the kind of emotions and people feel there. It's always something completely different to what we have in all these other societies here, in where reception is more of a pleasure. Also, in relation to this topic of the environment, we have, if you go to campus.kabbalah.info, maybe we can write that down, we have some local classes opening up in 4 cities around North America right now. And I took some notes of you here. Michelle from New York, Larissa from New York. Check out, there's going to be a class this week in Brooklyn in New York. I think, if I'm not wrong, it's either tomorrow or the day after, but if you go to campus.kabbalah.info, you can check that out. In Brooklyn, we have a class there. You can go meet each other up there, meet with other instructors. Actually, your instructors in the Wednesday class, Peter and Albert, I think they're also teaching that same very class locally there in New York this week. So Michelle and Larissa, I'm sure you're just down the road from that one. You have no excuses. Also have in Orlando, in Florida. So I know we have here Joyce, Michael, Brian, and Susie from Florida. I'm sure you're just down the road from Orlando right there. No? So you can always go to that. I think that's tomorrow night. Monday night, there's a class there in Orlando. We also have in San Francisco and in Los Angeles. So far, I've only seen Tina here from California. I'm sure you're close to either San Francisco or Los Angeles where you are. So that's also taking place either tomorrow or Tuesday. I can't remember the exact date. But check it out, campus.kabbalah.info. You have all the information there. You can register specifically for the events as well. But just take note of the address and turn up there. It's from 7 p.m. till 9 p.m., the classes. And we can't recommend enough getting that physical, local experience of meeting up with other people and joining these classes, and then coming to the convention as well, which is people from all around the world even turning up to these conventions. It just gives so much more than what we can get by studying online. So if you have that opportunity, or if you have the ability to make that opportunity happen, really, we very much recommend it.
Well, that's free choice. Okay, this is your free choice for environment right now. So if you're in New York, you got free choice. Do I want to hang out with my mates, or do I want to hang out with the spiritual boys?
So,
there we go. Now, we have a clip now, or?
Yeah, we'll go out with this video clip of Rav Leitman talking about the topic, and look forward to seeing you next time.
Have a great day, great night, wherever you are.
What is the kind of environment that helps a person prefer the internality over the externality, and how do you build that environment? What kind of an environment helps a person do that? An environment that appreciates the internality more than the externality. That's it, that's the environment. What do you mean? One must have such friends who also have free choice, because they are composed of a will to receive and a point within that desire, called a point in the heart, meaning that they have some sort of yearning for spirituality, from asking, what is the point in life? What do I live for? If a person asks that, if he cares about that, this is the kind of people that he should connect with. These people come to us, and we should actually organize them in groups and organize their connection with us, both men and women, and eventually all of that is only for one action, which is a continuous action in every moment. It has to be clear to a person, what is important for me? Internality more than externality. That's all. This is called a scrutiny. And from all these moments, if I assemble my effort as a process, then after a while, it happens. This is called every penny joins into a big account, and then the quantity of exertion turns into quality, and with that quality, I enter spirituality.